a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Poszerzona rzeczywistość. Expanding reality.
Sygula, Truth Theory. TruthTheory.com, your Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and website, as I just said, will all be linked down in the show description. Brother, it is so cool to see you. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Brendan. Thanks for this opportunity to speak on your show. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say on some of the questions you might have. Yeah.
Dude, so pumped to connect with you. You're a connection through our mutual brother, Chris Matthew, of course, of Forbidden Knowledge News. Shout out. And you're an OG, man. You've been doing this since 2010. You've got just an amazing amount of work underneath you here. You put out content regularly. Your YouTube is banging, which, again, guys, all the ways to find him linked below. You're us in Poland. You know what I mean? You're just this amazing expanded version of all of these interests and topics and exploration into mysteries. And you, my friend, have had some fascinating things along your journey as well, which we're going to talk about. So before we get to all of that cool shit, man, again, guys, all the ways linked below. And if you want to catch the afterthought, all the bonus stuff, check the link at the top as well. Dude, tell us a little bit about you, man.
Yeah, no. So, I grew up here in Poland. I've been living abroad for many years, so I actually have dual citizenship. I have British passport as well because I lived in London for many years. But first 20 years of my life, I was living here in Poland, and I guess I did not really have a lot of crazy paranormal experiences or interests. But somewhere around 2002, when I was 19, I started having a lot of these intuitive thoughts about karma, past lives, tarot cards, for example. I remember I would understand how tarot cards work without ever reading anything about them. So I had these intuitive ideas, and I thought maybe this has something to do with me doing this type of work in my past lives, maybe, or whatever. So I started investigating some of that. And, when I moved to London, 2005, I really started exploring a lot of different subjects. So I would go to different groups, theosophy, some New Age groups, Buddhist groups, Taoist groups, Spiritist groups, Wiccan groups, all these different types of philosophies or spiritual movements, and I would just learn. And I think one of the things about me is that because I always was into sports and I worked quite hard since I was a teenager, so I had a lot of self-discipline just to experiment on myself. So let's say I would read about some practice, and normally you would have to do a course or take some classes, whatever. I would just sit on my own, spend a couple of weeks and try to see if this is true or not, if this works or not. So this was kind of my approach for many years. I would basically try all sorts of different things on myself. Sometimes it would have negative results, sometimes positive, but through that I learned about a lot of the subjects we are interested in through experience. So I could kind of prove it to myself that there is something to these types of teachings. So let me give you a couple of examples. So let's say, I had this period where I was doing like Reiki type of healing, Qigong, and different types of healing modalities I was experimenting with. And for example, there was this technique called absent healing, which basically is like you visualize white light going through you and you try to send it through your heart center to someone on distance. And I would try that with my mother, who was located, 1,000 kilometers away or something. She was in Poland, I was in England, and she had some knee problem. And we would talk on Skype, and I would basically focus on her knee, try to send her energy. And after half an hour, when I was warming up, exactly the same time, she said, "Oh, my knee is warming up," So I had this kind of, let's say, the evidence for myself over and over that a lot of these teachings or these concepts are real. For example, I read stuff about out-of-body experiences, and then I had some period when I was actually practicing different out-of-body experience techniques, and one night I had an out-of-body experience. So this was kind of my path for many years, where I would experiment with different things. And then I guess around 2008 or 9, I had this experience which some people might think, maybe guy was hallucinating or something, because I smoked a little bit of weed, went to bed, and I saw this white light above my forehead, and I started having this kind of electric shock. Someone would basically send healing energy towards you, and imagine having Reiki, but amplify it 100 times. So I had this experience. It lasted maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. And at that time, I was shaking in bed. And, I was familiar with weed, so I know this wasn't a hallucination or anything. I feel like maybe the weed was just for me to be more open to the energy. And a couple of years later, I met a few people who actually had very similar experience, and they said it was just some kind of kundalini awakening. So after this experience, this is like 2008 or 9, I started becoming very sensitive to energies. So for example, I would go to a forest and I could feel the energy of trees, or I would go to a church and I would feel energy of prayer inside the church, or I would go to a room where they do some kind of healing methods and I would straight away start getting tingling in my forehead, where, my chakras and palms and things like that. So I thought, maybe because I'm doing all these healing modalities and I'm doing Qigong and things like that, maybe I'm just becoming more sensitive to energies. But then I stopped doing Qigong, and these abilities stayed with me till today. So I realized later on that evening when I had this weird experience, I had some kind of upgrade, like a single upgrade, where basically my energy body was activated and I became more sensitive. Then after that, at the same period, same time, I started having these prophetic dreams. Very often I would have a dream about something that's going to happen tomorrow or things like that. Very often symbolic, some kind of warnings about, some kind of guidance in dreams and things like that. And then, I remember, for example, reading a book about spirits, and one day, and the moment when I read the line about spirits, I had this, like someone's tapping me in my ear, like just to pay attention, So I started paying attention to these types of taps. And later on, when I was doing my sessions with psychedelics, which were really profound for me, I've done 7 years of these, I would connect with my guides and my higher self, and they would explain to me that actually that night when I had this activation, this was designed on purpose so I could start communicating with my spirit guides. And basically these taps became a form of communication. So sometimes, I can ask a question, I get like tap in my right hand might mean yes, type in my left hand might mean no. If I have to pay attention to something, I gonna get like someone's putting finger into my ear, things like that. So I started developing some of these abilities. And, 2011, for example, I met a girl, and turned out that she's my twin flame. So, she's very psychic, and she remembers a lot of our past lives and things like that. And it's also, when I was doing psychedelic sessions, I would ask a lot of questions about my past lives and things like that. And one time I asked, for example, how many times did we incarnate together with her? And the answer came straight away, thousands. So it's kind of funny because she's like from June, I'm from December. We have a lot of opposites and similarities. And in a way, like with twin flames, is that, I have my abilities, let's say, as a thinker, I can analyze very deeply different concepts. And then she has her senses developed because she's very psychic. So she can actually see some of these different realms, different beings, and then prove that to me, and things like that. So together we had a lot of, let's say, we could do a lot of stuff. But what happened was that at that time, I was very much into partying, as we talked about last time, and I was abusing myself with alcohol and drugs for a couple of years. And when we met, I met her, and she's like super sensitive, very psychic. So when we moved together, started living together, she started saying that basically me and my brother, because of some of our past and things like that, we attract a lot of these negative beings around us, and she doesn't like it. And she cannot, because she's so sensitive, she can see them and they are attacking her, whatever. So she said she could not stay around us because of that. And one day, for example, we found my brother, who had at that time big problems with like drugs and alcohol. We found him, he overdosed, and we found him on the floor. And when we entered the room, my Raquel, she said she saw two shadow beings jumping and feeding off him. So basically, when he was like laying overdose on the ground, she saw these like archonic or whatever beings kind of feeding off this energy. So what happened was that, because of that, one day she left and she disappeared, and she just sent me a message, said like, I cannot be around you because you attract all these bad beings, negative entities. And she just disappeared. And basically, I was heartbroken, and things like that. And I prayed. Basically, I just prayed to God, I want to get her back. I grew up Catholic, so I had this program about praying to God and things like that. And a couple of months later, we started speaking again. And she started telling me that there is this being that shows up very often around her because she sees spirits and things like that looks like me, but 20 years older. So she said, there's this being that looks like you, wears the same clothing, but it's older. And she said, he's helping me out with things, like, for example, she was doing an exam because she got qualified as a practitioner with a method called life alignment, which is a healing modality from South Africa. So basically, when she had her exams, she said that this guy would kind of whisper to her ear how to do the exam or stuff like that. So, one day, this is 2012, I was with her and I said to her, let's call this being, this entity, and I'm going to be asking questions and you're going to tell me what is he saying, basically. So, we called him and I asked him, like, what's the relationship between you and me? And she said he morphed his face into my face, showing me that it's basically me, and then morphed back to this older look. Then I asked him, can you help me with anything? And then she said he pulled this ring with different keys, basically symbolically meaning maybe different paths or different doorways, things like that, right? So we started doing these sessions and we learned that basically this is my higher self that appears to her as my older version. And then he gave us his name, which Amadeus, which basically he said this is just for me to call him when I need and things like that. And this was kind of my beginning of my relationship with my higher self, officially, let's say, conscious relationship. So sometimes, I would need some guidance and things like that. I'm asking, like, Amadeus, what about this? And then I might get a download, might have a dream about something, things like that. So, he also became her guide because we're twin flames, etc. So I think what happened was that, because when we separated, I prayed and then he stepped in to kind of got us back together. And we got back together afterwards. Then we had like a couple of times when we would go back and split up again, things like that. But that was, like kind of my beginning of my relationship with my higher self.